You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Vino Axel Schwarzenegger. ¡Gol!
Va a pegarle el Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And it's Soccer Today, Duane. We're back. Everything's almost back to normal, isn't it?
It's almost back to normal, although my voice, if it's cracking a little bit today, it's because I got that post-holiday cold that seems to go around every year. So we'll fight through it, though, for you. This is technically New Year's Day in terms of the holiday, the officialness of it,
Yes.
which is why, absurdly, there are games going on right now as we record this, Kevin.
We both got surprised because we're like, yeah, we watched some games in the weekend 2 days ago, Liverpool against Man City. And wait, what? Both teams are playing right now? What's going on?
Yeah, I know. As I said, I mean, I'm usually pretty on top of this, as most people know, but and I knew in the back of my mind that they played these two quick games over New Year's every year, but it just, it completely caught me off guard, particularly following, the disappointment, if I'm putting my partisan hat on, of the result on the weekend against Liverpool, the 1-0 loss there, which I think, as I said in the lead-in to the show last week, I think pretty much all but eliminates any chance that Pep's first season in charge is going to end with ribbons on a trophy, unless I guess it's the Champions League trophy, the FA Cup, but that's not going there quite yet today.
No, exactly. And you know what I was thinking too? It's, even though we expect it to be a very offensive type of game because both teams usually can't really defend that well for teams that are top of the table, and 1-0. So again, going against all odds.
Yeah, well, exactly. And I think I said that too the last time. No, I've said all that. It'll probably end 0-0. Well, it didn't end 0-0. It ended 1-0. Look, lots to go on this, Kevin, and maybe I think I've voiced my opinion a lot on what's wrong with City. I think that obviously the other side of the equation is that Liverpool has had City's number a great deal over the past few years. City really struggles against teams that get a high pressure on them and force them sort of out of their rhythm. They like to sort of sit back and wear an opponent down, right? And if your team can take them out of that rhythm, they can often struggle with that. This is the Leicester issue too. Leicester does similar things against them, so just more of the same in terms of mine. But from an outside perspective, Kevin, I'll ask you, Pep, his first season in charge, what would you rank it? Let's give it a 1 to 10 right now. I'll give you my thoughts after, but why don't you give me a quick 1 to 10 off the top of your head right now? What Pep's first half season in charge at City has been so far?
I would say 6.5, 7, because the way he wants to change the way this team plays, the way he literally changes the philosophy of the team without changing the whole roster, there's only so much you can do. Trying to fit that square peg into the round hole, it does take some adjustment. He's been filing that peg to make it round, but still is not perfect. Just look at John Stones and his experiment with him. And it makes it's a big, for me, it's Pep at Man City in a nutshell. It's great potential, good idea. Execution not necessarily always there, but eventually, once you have the idea, the instincts, the philosophy, the result and the execution is a thing that will come eventually.
Yeah, you'd hope. Well, unless you hate City, which you hope it won't. But nonetheless, look, 6 is kind of where I would go. I think obviously there's been some success. There's the win over Barcelona. There's been a few good performances along the way, but nonetheless, there's been a lot of times when this club has come up short against opponents that they really should roll over, and that's hard to completely comprehend. Now, look, last year we talked a lot about, when we did talk about the Premier League, we talked a lot about how I felt, as a City observer, that it was time to turn that roster over, and certainly there has not been a ton of that. They have the young Brazilian coming in, Jesus, in January. That's going to be something interesting up top, because Iheanacho has not necessarily lived up fully to his potential, which is understandably still a teenager, right? So
yeah, no, exactly. He's young, and the development at this level, you do have moments of brilliance, but it's the consistency day in, day out against the top team and the bottom team to be able to give the same output for your team, and we haven't seen that from Iheanacho.
Yeah, and like I say, really they need another look up top. I've always felt that an underrated player in City's past was Dzeko. Certainly he was inconsistent and maddening that way, but when he was on, he was a key player to their 2 title runs. And then you look back to their first title run to get into real ancient history now. Balotelli was at the peak of his very brief powers at that point. So
very brief.
It's although he's doing well in France, so we should give him a little credit for that.
True.
Nonetheless, obviously, I think you need that other look up top, because Aguero, first off, he's made of glass. He's done okay this year, staying out of injury problems. But second off, he's a player that sometimes has a bit of a hot head, that sometimes can't keep himself on the pitch, that sometimes I think mentally gets frustrated, and that affects his game. And if this continues the way it is, it could be another long season for City, who, let's face it, if you look at the actual performances within 2016, you look at the point total that they had over the course of the year, which isn't a season, we understand that, but in the calendar year, they actually were down to 5th or 6th, I believe. So if you look at it, I know United finished above them, because United fans are enjoying pointing that out at the moment. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And I'm sitting here taping this. As we're taping this, I have it on in the background. I'm watching 10-Man City. Fernandinho needs to stop getting red cards. I think that's pretty clear. I've watched them struggle to break Burnley down, and this was a pattern that I saw a lot last year as well, and certainly against Liverpool, a very good team that now maybe is the only challenge to Chelsea in this title race that I do still think Chelsea, has in its pocket, though.
Could be over today if Sunderland continues. It's 1-1 right now. If Sunderland gets a result against Liverpool, that will make things very interesting for Chelsea. Just to finish on City, Duane, for a second, when you're looking at the striker position, when you talked about Aguero, talk about Pep Guardiola's philosophy towards the false nine, or trying to play with somebody that can play the game, get them on top, and make everybody else involved, and just make that core move forward on that pitch. It's a big change from the name that you mentioned, Dzeko, a few years ago, and even Aguero. They don't have that midfielder that can position himself as a false nine to give them the complement of that extra pass, that extra second to break down the defense. And that's what seems for me a little conflicting when you look at the roster. Is there's not one player that could be that false nine, that Messi, Busquets, that whatever those were, the Ribéry, or whatever Pep had in his former teams a few years back. He doesn't have that false nine capabilities with City, and it's one of the reasons why they cannot break down defenses.
Yeah, and even from in City's own past, you look at the decline of Yaya Toure, who's, integrated himself back in the club, but he's still a shell of what he was a few years ago, when his complete power was able to dominate games, to change games on his own accord. I always say, if you look back to the 2011 FA Cup win and the 2012 league win, it's Aguero that's carrying that team in his back now. Now, you have some talent there. Guys like De Bruyne obviously are going to be stars for that. I think David Silva is still a wonderful little player, but the little is a key part of that too. I think he struggles sometimes with that in the Premier League, even with his talent. They just need another force up there. They need changes, and they need to turn it over. I could go on all day on this, but I'll cut it off here. We've gone all the way without talking about Bravo. Yeah. And that is ultimately, I think, the most glaring error that Pep has made. It's a football manager kind of move, and that's sort of surprising from him, that he had this idea of a prototype, and he's interjected it into a squad without any consideration, in my opinion, of whether or not the prototype actually worked within the game that he was playing.
Or the rest of the team. That's what I'm thinking. Because when I think about Bravo and I think about the non-chemistry between Bravo and some of his backline, more Stones, because that's where mistakes happen when Stones trying to give the ball back to Bravo or Bravo trying to give the ball to Stones. They're not on the same wavelength and they don't connect correctly with passes, and it led to goals, it led to mistakes, it led to openings for the other team, and that happened more than I have fingers on one hand this season, and that's a lot.
Yeah. So a lot has to change, and it probably won't change until the summer. At this point in time, I think if you're a Manchester City fan, as everyone knows I am, what you're hoping for is that they don't collapse completely out of a top 4 position, because certainly that was touch and go at times last year, so that they can maintain their position in the Champions League and that they do okay in, at least the FA Cup. I think that they should give that a go. I think that was the one thing, the saving grace that helped last season be more palatable, was that League Cup win. We understand the League Cup is what it is, but nonetheless, it's still a day out. It's still a day that your supporters get to gather behind, because I'll tell you that too. The Manchester City supporters are grumpy, right? They will turn quickly at this particular time because they're frustrated with now what's almost 18 months of kind of the same thing over and over again with, 2 different managers in charge and neither seemingly able to figure out a way to get them out of what is a funk for a team with them as much resources as they have. The other main game of the weekend that I thought we should address, Kevin, was the derby, the Old Firm derby that took place on a Sunday morning. It was the first, yes. had to check myself there for a second. Look, I watched that game. I made a point of getting up and having a look at that one. It was a game that showed exactly what the gap in Scottish football is right now. And
not too much of a gap. A 2-1 victory for Celtics on the road, but a gap nonetheless. Celtic clearly the best team in Scotland.
Yeah, look, you're right. It was a decent effort by Rangers for sure, and probably a much better effort, obviously, than the first time out this year. And the first derby back.
Yeah, it was like 4-0 or something earlier this year.
Yeah, 5, I believe, or 4. Yes, yeah. It was a whitewashing the first time. So, there's such an interesting cultural dynamic to the Old Firm derby that it's hard for me, at least as an outsider without a horse in the Scottish race, to get too excited by them. I understand that they're important games in the culture there, but there's so much nastiness around them that it's really a lot of what we don't like about the game sometimes. So that certainly was part of my reluctance to embrace this totally. But the other thing too, and it's hard to figure out how to fix this or if it even can be, but Celtic has a 19-point lead now. 19-point lead at the top. It's January 2nd, and that's a lot of season with not much to play for at the top. Obviously, there's other positions available. You can get the Champions League qualifying position, the UEFA League spots. Those matter, but it's not the same in any real way. And I just don't know what the answer is there. I've never been able to comprehend, Kevin, what it must be like to be a Celtic fan, because what do you have?
Well, you either win the whole thing or you don't.
Yeah, there's no win or lose in domestically. You have to win everything there. Otherwise, it's a disappointment.
Yeah, well, especially with the result not the result, but the success they had over the last few years when Rangers went down and went belly up and rose from the ashes and now back. But when they went down, they literally found themselves Celtics with, I don't want to say no competition, but outside of Aberdeen with a small little rise, they didn't have that one team to push them over the brink to make them relevant. And since Brendan Rodgers showed up, at least there's some sort of relevancy in Europe. They had some good results, surprising result in the group they were, because they were with the same group as Barcelona, Manchester United, and Mönchengladbach. It was a tough group, and they got some results, and they have some potential. And we've seen this, but yeah, you're right. In the domestic league itself, it's trophy or bust.
Yeah, and you're right. In terms of Europe too, when they see that draw, really what it comes down for them, and I find this sad in some ways, that their season is somehow probably defined, basically on a 3-3 draw with City. that was their night that they'll remember over the course of the year, was the ability to play with one of the richer clubs out there, obviously a club that we just spoke of at length that's struggling, but nonetheless to have that European night. And that's all they had. They didn't make Europa. Mönchengladbach got the spot, so it's done for them this year. They really just have a title cruise to look forward to, and I guess the Cups. But
yeah,
that's I don't know. It's hard to get into that mentality. I touched on it a moment ago. Supporting Celtic is as much a cultural experience as it is a sporting experience, I think, for many people as well. So I'll ask. Any thoughts on the weekend yourself, Kevin, before we say goodbye to the segment?
Just quickly, United, another victory. Manchester United slowly getting into rhythm. I think it's 11 wins in a row, all competitions, 6 in the Premier League before today. So we're talking about Manchester United slowly turning things around, and that is because of Zlatan's great play. And Duane, I have to make a mea culpa. I have to make amends. If we go back to a few months ago when Zlatan started playing in the Premier League, we both had our doubts. We both have some, not issues, but we had our questioning surrounding, well, is he going to be able to cut it here when he comes back to France and different type of league and different type of situation? Well, guess what? Over the last 12 games, yeah, he can cut it. And he's probably the second hottest striker in the league right now, if not the hottest striker behind Diego Costa.
Yeah, certainly he has turned it around as well. Speaking of turning around, one way a city can break teams down is to score 19-yard strikes from bad angles by fullbacks, which just happened there. It is 1-0 City over Burnley. That's your late breaking news, way after you probably, when you're hearing this, it's probably way after it happened, but that's what I just saw. Let's take a break, Kevin.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com. You know how much I was walking in the subway the other day and I was saying out loud, I was speaking our intro. I hear it so much.
Golazo. Yeah, cliche. That was a pretty nice strike there.
It's a nice strike indeed, and it's 1-0 for City in that game, but we'll leave that alone. Look, the offseason's a funny time, and we can look at a few other things. There's a thread on Reddit every year now. Well, this is the second year it's done, so maybe every is a bit of a stretch, but in Reddit terms, that's like half its life, basically. That this guy goes to, I believe, Disneyland, and he sits there for 5 days, and because it's the busiest 5 days of the year, and he does nothing but count and catalog every soccer strip, jersey, whatever you want to call it, that he sees walk past, to sort of give a snapshot of what soccer fandom in the United States in now 2017 looks like. And I find it interesting a little bit. Thought we'd have a little chat about that. And Kevin, the first thing that jumps out at me when I look at this is that there's one graph that's really tall, and then
double the second position.
Yeah, double the second position, and that graph, of course, is Barcelona, if you want to say it the way they do.
Barça.
Yeah, it's
Barça.
odd.
But I think I've been thinking about this for a few hours, right? Since we talked about this. You know what European clubs do that we don't do here in North America, because here we like our money a lot, is sell cheaper version of the kits in regular stores, which is the case for Barcelona.
Yeah, they are pretty omnipresent. I was in the Gallerina Mall here in the west end of Toronto the other day, and anyone who knows what that is, if you're from Toronto, you know it's kind of a sketchy mall. But there's a store that's completely nothing but knockoffs in there, so you don't see that as much with the domestic stuff.
I'm not even talking about knockoffs here. I'm talking about official licenses. But you know, in Europe, I have one of those for my French national team jersey. It's a Euro qualifier jersey with no brands on it. There's no Nike, there's no Adidas, there's no Puma, there's no Macron. It's France national team jersey. It cost me $20, and it's official license. It's just really cheap, but you look like you're part of that team. And that's kind of my idea behind it, is if we want to make sure that, okay, Orlando City comes in fourth really close to Brazil here. Top 5 is Barça, Man United, Brazil, Orlando City FC, Real Madrid.
Colombia is the next one after
Yes,
that.
that's Colombia national team, then Chelsea, then other teams. That's Flamengo, yeah. Fluminense after, but it's all teams that are not. Well, I'm surprised Orlando's there in 4th, but it wasn't Florida after all.
Yeah, it's in Orlando. In fact,
it's in Orlando.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's an interesting thing too. I mean, Orlando in 4th. That's actually, I think, reassuring that they are able to get that much. And I think that if I were to do a similar thing here in Toronto, that I would see TFC would be up around 4th or 5th as well. I always have that debate, and this is a funny one to think about: is that what is the most popular soccer team in the city of Toronto? You could do this for any big city that has an MLS team, and it's very rarely going to be the MLS team. I don't think it is here today. I personally, I believe it is. It's either Liverpool or Benfica, and Benfica is the one people won't necessarily know until you know how Portuguese Toronto is. But what do you think second figure team in Montreal is, Kevin?
Barca, probably the first one. Montreal Impact, probably somewhere in there. I have seen a lot more Montreal Impact jersey, to be fair, this year than years before. Like Drogba really helped the sales with jersey, t-shirts. And that goes to my point. When you have a big star like this, the club makes t-shirt with the 11 and Drogba in the back, and people are selling it like hotcakes. Maybe we have to find a way to sell jerseys that are not $200 each. Then maybe we'll have the teams of Major League Soccer like in better rankings, or at least in better perception. But yeah, it's hard though when you have a team like Barca, which is one of the most loved team in the world, and the Messi and the players and the culture behind it and the spread of the foot culture, and you fall in love with this, watch documentary, you like the way it grows and it grew and it became, now it's capitalist, but for a moment there it was, and OSBL was there to to help UNICEF, to help other foundations. Now it changed a little bit, but you still have that culture, that attitude that people fell in love with over the last 10, 20 years. It's hard to get away from. Like Barca is Barca, and it's hard to compete in a kit strip level with Barca.
Yeah, no, you're right. I do think that if you look at the top 5 here, 3 of the top 5. Let's throw Orlando out for a second, because that's obviously a local.
It's a geographical bias of that survey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but when you have the top 4, then would be Barca, Manchester United, Brazil, and Real Madrid. These are, brands basically that, including Brazil, and I'm calling Brazil a brand here. That
it's not Brazil itself; it's the Seleção. It's but you're right. It's the brand. Yeah.
Yeah, they transcend the sport, right? And that's not something that's going to be very difficult for a North American team to ever get to. There are a lot of people, I guarantee you, that are wearing that Barca strip that probably only watch Barca play twice a year, maybe 3-4 times at the top end. They probably watch the Clásicos and maybe a Champions League final if they make it. But they're Barca fans because they like the idea of Barca. And for a club over here to ever get to that point, I don't even know if it's possible, because there's too much history there that you have to overcome. You'd have to go 100 years into the future. We'd have to get a time machine. I'm really looking for a time machine. If anyone knows how to find one, I need one for a lot of different reasons right now. But at any rate, if you were to get that time machine and go 100 years into the future, then maybe you might see, a team like the Galaxy, I guess, and that would be the only team close. But the first thing, let's just take this back to MLS. Like the first thing MLS needs to get behind before we can even talk about any type of ability to compete, even with your, let's go down the list quite a bit here, like Italy jerseys or Byron or whatever.
Boca or Celtic or Club America. They're all in front of Major League Soccer teams.
Yeah. There's a Chicago Fire as the next one on there, which is a bit random. But
and Atlanta United before Atletico, apparently.
Yeah, there you go. Which is the newness of it, I think. And also there's a bit of a geographical thing. It's pretty close to Atlanta. Anyway, the point I'm making is that you need to make these kind of jerseys national first. Like the first step in having MLS teams seen anywhere close. This is why I always, no offense to Sounders fans listening out there, I've had arguments with them where they think they're a global brand, and they legitimately think this. I don't understand how, but they do, and it's absurd because it's not even a national brand. It's a very regional product, MLS right now. It's a very hyper local product. MLS right now, and I don't know how you overcome that. You mentioned cheaper stuff. I don't see, they call them jerseys, right? I don't see jerseys in Major League Soccer. That's not the worst idea I've ever heard of, to try and get more of that out there. But it's a tough slug. It doesn't matter. That's the other question there. Does it really matter that some kid from suburban LA, we'll say, Orange County, decides that he likes soccer a little bit, but he's not really committed to fully, buying into watching it week in, week out, and he thinks Messi's pretty cool, so he buys a Barca kit. Is there anything wrong with that fundamentally? I don't know.
No, like the guy might not have like good taste, but outside of that, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. I think we worry too much about this stuff here. And the other thing to finish this thought, I read the thread that followed this, and one of the big concerns that always pops up is how the U.S. stuff, because in the United States, obviously, like American kits are behind Colombia and they're behind Brazil, and they're pretty high there. I think Colombia and Brazil are the only two national teams that are ahead of them right now, which I actually think is a big accomplishment for them. They had to have more USA kits.
Italy's in front of them, and then I'll go through. There's a few more.
There's two USA kits in here, so because they've split the men and the women up.
But for you're correct. And even England is way down. But let's go back to USA here for a second. Mexico's in front of USA. That's not really that surprising. But when you look at, that's what I'm saying. United States jerseys should not be expensive. You should not have to fork out $100 to get yourself a jersey of your national team. You should be able to afford this easily. You should be able to be proud to wear it, to buy 2, 3, 4, and have it in the rotation 4 out of 7 days. That's the type of outreach that we want to have from the fans. And if you give them that opportunity by not asking them to remortgage their house to buy a kit, well, it makes more sense. Maybe it's just me because I'm cheap, I don't know, but I would find it easier to part ways with my hard-earned money if it wasn't $200, and I'm barely exaggerating, for barely any textile at all.
Yeah, if you want a name on it or something like that too, you're looking at more even. I'll tell you a quick little anecdote about that. In my past, I once donated this to the cause, so don't worry, folks. Don't get too angry with me. I once in my past had a Honduras strip, and the reason I did is because I needed something to wear when I was in Honduras, and you could literally buy them for $10 there, $10, so whatever that translated to, but very cheaply, and that's why they're so omnipresent. Whereas a Canada kit's going to run you. You can get them, $100, but
and if you pay $100, you're lucky because it's 100 something. And I remember my Umbro short that I bought because it was that model with the weird collar and not nice, and I still have it today, and I barely wear it because it's not even comfortable. So I paid like over $100 for a jersey that's not even comfortable. Yeah, that's life of North American soccer fans.
Yeah, precisely. Jerseys, man. It's or strips. Sorry, I just get into the language of that one.
Speaking of strips, there's a great photo that I've seen yesterday, Duane. It's related, and it's Ronaldinho. It's Ronaldinho with every single shirt that he wore. There's a gigantic wall with like thousands of shirts of different numbers, different teams, different clubs, a lot of Brazil team, but it's actually impressive because Ronaldinho is not just a player that's been grown into culture. Yeah, he's been on the lower side of his decline in the last few years. But the foot culture, the love of the game, Ronaldinho's been a player that, a lot of things went wrong and behind the scenes and how he got transferred in money and all that. But him and the love of the game, that's when you see him looking at all his jerseys and that little smile, that happiness, that sense of look what I accomplished. It was impressive to see.
Yeah, players get made fun of for the whole kissing the badge thing and, sort of the world that they live in. But you think that those things matter to them deep down, especially when they're nearing the end, to see those jerseys on the wall and feel a part of each of those clubs. It has to be. I always see that with TFC's 10 years old now. So they're starting to have more and more alumni, for lack of a better way to put it, come back in a real way where they have a connection to this stupid little club in Canada. And that's kind of nice. And the strip sort of speaks to that. That's a bit off topic from where we started this, but it's not a bad way to end it though, Kevin. So let's take the break now. We'll come back. We're going to talk a little bit about the Indian Super League.
The bits and bytes on Soccer Today. St. Clair, Duane, live January 20th in Ottawa. Listen to them play Cheating, the new single, available everywhere.
Awesome. All right. Bits and bytes. Yeah, we're probably going to do bits and bytes a little bit over the next couple segments here, as long as we can stretch this out. As I said, my voice is a little off today, but I did want to talk about the Indian Super League final, not in any detailed ways, because I'm not going to lie, I didn't get up at 3 a.m. to watch the Indian Super League final. In fact,
jeez, where's your commitment, Duane? You're not even committed? I'm just kidding. I didn't watch it either.
Yeah, let's quickly find out the actual result while we're talking here. But the 41 million people watched the thing. And this is where I wanted to sort of come in with this. 41 million people. Now, India is a very big place. The book Soccernomics, or why England doesn't win the World Cup, as it's called in the UK, really detailed. They actually broke down the most underperforming country in the world football. Canadians will be, happy to know they didn't finish first as the most underperforming country in the world. They finished second. But the number one country was India. India, of course, massive population. They're not as poor as I think sometimes we, xenophobically think. So it's a country that just has a lot of potential, but yet they've never really been able to get, quote unquote, their crap together. And a big part of that has been their domestic league situation. Remind you of anyone, folks?
Which domestic league? We don't even have one.
Yeah, at least they have one. And
they have like two.
Yeah. The ISL, not the ISL, the I League, they call it, which is kind of a mess. And I've talked to a few Indian people that have knowledge of this, about this in the past. And it's a very interesting sort of dynamic to me, what's happening over there, because there are a lot of really direct comparables to what's happening in Canada in terms of the fact that you have this entity, they have this dysfunctional sort of mess below. They do have it into a league format, but it's never really been very successful. It's marginally professional. They have no real international success outside of their own country. So it's a league, but it's kind of not a very good one. So someone swept in, IMG backed, so big money coming in, and created a franchise model situation, which is the Indian Super League. And that is the league that has now got 41 million people in just 3 years watching their final game. This
is a very weird format. Sorry to interrupt them, but if people don't know, it's a 2-3 month season. It's like a sprint. It's more like a showcase, not necessarily an exhibition, but it's a showcase of what this league could be in the future, because of the heat, because of problems and the size of the league. Right now, it's just 2 months basically of a championship, but they have plans in the very near future to go from 2-3 to 4-5.
Yeah, excuse me. That is the story, and they are going to merge some of these I League teams too, and basically the I League folks have waved the white flag and are going to try and integrate somewhere into this. And they're going to create some kind of hybrid system that exists, but it's kind of what we've talked about over here too. They'll create some promotion and relegation between the second and third tier, but there won't be any to the first tier, and that will be. The main league in the country would be the Super League, which will have the franchise model, which again speaks very similar to what we are now seeing in North America. As I said, you can find people. It's pretty easy to find people that complain about this. That complain about single entity, this isn't single entity, but complain about closed leagues and think that they're the worst thing in the world, right? But here we have a situation where a country that had no success whatsoever has managed through marketing and through effort and through the ability to get some bigger name players in because of that marketing and effort to get 41 million people watching their final. And I don't think, maybe the ends justify the needs there. And if you're someone who's a purist about this, sometimes, we have this argument all the time on this show, but you kind of have to shake your head a little bit and take a step back, because how is it wrong? How is it bad that this league is creating attention, even if it's not the purest form that you wanted? There were 4 people watching the I League. There's 41 million people watching this. And
yes, if you consider 41 million versus 1.4 billion, I think in India, close to maybe more than that, actually, it is a very low percentage. But we're talking about 41 million people watching a soccer game in India, where soccer is not the first, it's not the second sport, somewhere between third, fourth, and fifth sport, depending on which region. So we're talking about a country that, it's very similar to what we have here outside of demographic, which is million folds in India. But we're talking about here where Yeah, maybe Canada should maybe look at the Super League model type of.
Fair enough. By the way, the winner was Atletico di Calcutta is the
Yeah.
champion. They are the current. Well, they are the back-to-back. Well, they won the first championship and they won this one as well. That's actually the team I believe that Ian Hume had played for at one point. At any rate, so there is that.
I think
as well.
so too. But it's going to be new teams next year. Speaking of Calcutta, there will be another team from Calcutta. There'll be a team from Bengal, West Bengal, that will join the Super League next year. So Super League is their fourth season. We'll already have gone from 8 to 10 teams, and having more of your presence in more region in India, which is one of the reasons you make a league important too, is if locally, regionally, in every team's hotbeds, they get supporters going, create rivalry, create a inter-country game. That's when it's time to do so. So when you have more teams, actually have some derbies as well inside those.
Exactly. And by the way, that is in fact Ian Hume's current team is the champion. So congratulations to Ian Hume to win the Indian Championship. A player that has quite the storied career himself. His wall is going to be very interesting when he retires, Mr. Hume as well. And
thank you for that goal in Honduras. You are a shining light. You are our beacon, Ian Hume, Indian superstar, Super League.
Yes, exactly. And that I think tells you what the level is. Ian Hume is a guy that is a decent player that has had a good career. He's a journeyman though. He's really shined in the Indian League, and I think that's been good for a guy like that. You're looking at I'm looking at the roster right now, and they have just a quick count here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 players seem to be on this roster that aren't Indian. So out of 24 or whatever it is right now. So that's a pretty good quota ratio there. A lot of Indian players getting an opportunity to play. I think that the level of the Indian footballer based on the international results is pretty low, but nonetheless, this can only help them in my mind. Now, they do
sorry, I was just going to say the caveat of that. You say it might help them. It is hard to help a national team, a national program, a national player pool when the season is only 2-3 months, and you play with better players only for a short amount of time, and the imports are playing more than the local product. I'm talking about the players here. So it is difficult for now to see how the Super League might help Indian soccer. But if you go back to more games, more months, more playing time with the Indian players and the foreign players, technically that should raise the level of the Indian players.
Yeah, and look, I think that this bears repeating, and this is a lesson that I think some of our Canadian listeners need to hear as well, is that the purpose of a league isn't directly to make a national team better. That can't be the purpose of the league. No league in the world can exist with that as its only focus. The purpose of a league is to grow the sport in all parts of the country, and that thus, as a result of that, eventually lead to a stronger system overall, which then in turn will make your national team better. But that is not an overnight solution. And I think Canadian Premier League fans, as much as you can be a fan of an idea, need to realize that, because the Canadian Premier League is likely going to launch with a smaller quota than we'd like. It's absolutely going to launch as a closed system. So people are going to be upset about that. And it probably won't produce a true Canadian national team player for a few years. But if you allow it to grow and to prosper, then eventually you're going to have, some kid that's 2 years old in Winnipeg right now is going to grow up watching the Winnipeg Fury 2.0 and is going to dream of playing for them, and he's going to get good enough to do so, and then he's going to move on to a bigger club and he'll play for the national team, right? That's how it works. It's about the inspiration. It's about the growth of the game overall, not necessarily the direct production of players for the national team. Yeah, it's guys like Ashton Morgan are probably going to find, although he signed for a little while longer for TFC, but guys like that, Kyle Becker, even if he can stick around, there's a few guys in League One that are still sticking around, I think, with that idea in mind. It's going to extend their career and give them longer time to play. But these aren't national team pool players necessarily. I know Becker's played a little bit, but
he's on the fringe, though. He's on the fringe of the national team. Let's face it.
Yeah, these are guys that are just professionals that deserve an opportunity to have a professional career in their own country and never had before. And the existence of those people will ultimately, eventually lead to an increased performance by the national team, but it's not directly about that. And I think that that's probably the lesson that the Indian folks are learning right now. But 41 million people, I'll say that one more time. There's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty cool.
I would love to have those ratings, not necessarily for us, just for Major League Soccer or anything. 41 million people watching sports. That's a lot.
Yeah, they can't have 41 million Canadians because there aren't 41 million Canadians.
It's not even 40. They're not even 35. Like, jeez.
There you go. All right, real quickly, we'll wrap up the show with a little bit of a transfer rumor roundup, and I think that moving forward in the off season on Mondays, we'll try and do that. We'll just sort of, it's hard to keep track of them over the course of the week. They come fast and furious. We'll sort of, bring a few of them forward and put them into a package each Monday so that we can keep on top of them in a general way. But
and to give everybody a remedy for their case of the Mondays, talking about potential for your club always helps.
Yes, exactly. Before we do that, let's just end this block with a little bit of talk about a rumor that's out there, and we'll stress it's rumor.
It's a pretty heavy one, though, I have to say, and it's evolving every single minute. So before the end of the day, it might be more than a rumor.
Yeah, then that's Andrea Pirlo may in fact be retiring. Now, he posted a photograph of his legs on a beach on Instagram 2 days ago. That's a strange segue. I'm going somewhere with this. Let me go. And the first thought that crossed my mind was, shouldn't he be training, old man? And maybe he doesn't want to anymore. And if that's the case, then he can do NYC FC no greater favor than to step aside in time for them to get his DP salary off the book and to change that club in a way. Brilliant player, though, that I'm not an Italian fan. I'm not a Juve fan, but Pirlo, I'm a Pirlo fan, and I've always enjoyed watching that guy. And there's very few people in the world that have not. He's just one of those great players that we're going to remember, long into the night, right, Kevin?
Oh, and especially his greatest achievement will probably become when he steps on a dead ball. His amount of free kick goals that he made over the last 5-10 years for the national team for Juve. It's how almost guarantee they were those goals. You saw Pirlo step up for a free kick. It's going to go in. It's going to bend it around like five guys. He's going to make the ball do things that it's not supposed to do. And it's going to dip. It's going to find the net. And that's what we're used to. Pirlo's special when he's on a dead ball will always be for me what I remember about Andrea Pirlo. Yes, he was able to marshal a midfield, able to be a sweeper, make the ball go forward. But whenever Andrea stepped over a dead ball, if it was 30 yards in, it was a goal.
Yes. Multiple Italian champion, 2006 world champion, brilliant player. And if it is in fact the end for him, I think that we all feel privileged to have watched him play. Kevin, a couple minutes early. Let's wrap this up. We'll come back with a few transfer. Sorry, go ahead, guys.
I have a few other ones. There's a big rumor from France and Italy right now. Thiago Motta, who his contract is over with PSG, he's looking to moving on. Big rumor of him in MLS, and apparently the two clubs that are interested in Thiago Motta are Montreal and Toronto. So that's interesting.
No, precisely. And it's interesting from, obviously Montreal's got the DP slot, but Toronto does not. So that does speak to the possibility of people moving in and out, and either that or like, I don't know,
allocation heavy, TAM heavy on Motta's contract, possibly too.
If you brought a guy like that in, let's say TFC knows that Javinko is leaving at the end of 2018, say 2017. They could possibly structure a contract in such a way that they brought a guy in August and paid him a lot of TAM off the top and gave him sort of a 2.5-year contract that was prorated for that half year, and then would sort of fit under the salary cap, and that would be almost like a rental for this year to really push for an MLS Cup championship, and then obviously they would then move on with them as a main look after that. But certainly there would have to be something creative to bring a guy of that stature to Toronto for sure. Montreal might have a little less difficulty doing, and it is also interesting. Obviously, the two Eastern Canadian clubs, clearly have some Italian connections now, because increasingly those contacts are becoming more and more front and center.
Yep. Other few tidbits of news. Eric Torres, better known as Kubo, returns to Dynamo after loan to Cruz Azul FC. Will he stay this time around? Will the Dynamo decide to, you know what, we're not even good anyway, so why not trying to make money off of Kubo and send him back to Mexico somewhere? That's interesting. U.S. Junior Flores agreed to a 3-year MLS deal. We'll see where he lands, depending of the reallocation. No, there's some re-entry draft or re-entry that one. And another one, RSL offered to FC Groningen, that's in Norway, for Albert Rusnak, reportedly 2.5 million. That will probably be a DP for RSL. Not necessarily a big name in the world of soccer, but a big name in Scandinavian soccer, could be joining RSL. That would maybe be one of the first signs that RSL is trying something different for next year for their roster, because, well, let's face it, if they don't have Landon Donovan, if they decide to go somewhere else, and it's that Albert Rusnak, maybe they do have a change of philosophies heading to 2017.
Yeah, that's the one downfall of having a team that has such a defined tactic and structure and philosophy, is that when the person who created that and was, the main driving force behind it leaves, it becomes very difficult to redefine yourselves. Certainly, I think RSL is having a redefining stage of its history right now, and it was a great. I think it is the quintessential MLS 2.0 club, and we'll see how they adjust to MLS 3.0, because I do think they need to. And it's unfortunate for them, because I do think they were very well run anyway, and the success they had is a testament to how in MLS 2.0 smarts could outspend money, so to speak, if that makes sense. And they did, but I think you need money now to end smarts, and that's a different era altogether. The Torres is the other quick one to touch on. What a strange MLS career he's had. He was he was the player when Chivas went bye-bye that everyone pointed to, and it never worked out after, and it's hard to really understand why.
It's like he doesn't want to play here and always wants to get loaned, or people are just making money off his back. That's probably the latter. It's probably closer to reality.
Yeah, maybe, we always used to sort of make fun of Chivas for having that kind of weird identity in terms of being a Mexican club, sort of, kind of, maybe. But maybe that was it. Maybe he felt more comfortable in that environment. Maybe he felt part of something there that he hasn't and just doesn't in the rest of Major League Soccer, because certainly his effort and his results have not even come close to matching what they did in that initial season. Sometimes players just have flashes in the pans. We talked about Mario Balotelli earlier in the show. So, it happens, and it will happen again and again and again.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Got any final thoughts, Kevin?
No, we're all good.
We're all good. All right. Until next time, I'll let Kevin, as always, say goodbye.
Until next time on SPN Radio for Soccer Today Live. Enjoy your New Year's Eve. No, New Year's Day the 2nd, or your holiday if it's a statutory day. Enjoy it. Watch some soccer. And until next time, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.